This session we've got Cem Savas from Plantific, who's one of the co-founders and the chief executive, and we have Ellie Holt from Notting Hill Genesis. So, Cem, I'm going to disappear. I will join you again for questions, and Ellie, and just encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the session, and I'll facilitate that at the end. So, Cem, Ellie, over to you guys. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here and starting slightly late, but nevertheless, I think it's going to be an insightful 45 minutes, and I will start sharing my screen, which will hopefully come up with the presentation. Let's see. Can you see this? I hope so, right? Okay. So the topic today is battling the backlog and how what we call leading landlords are basically dealing with the backlog and what the sort of work in progress jobs are doing at the moment, what ideas our landlords have to sort of improve going forward, and what we as a tech partner have sort of learned and are doing in the sector. A little bit about the two speakers. Ellie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Ellie Holt. I am the Group Director of Assets at Notting Hill Genesis. Notting Hill Genesis, for those of you who don't know, has about 64,000 properties in and around London, predominantly in London. My team are responsible for planned investment and day-to-day repairs. I've been in the housing sector for about 20 years, and it's been really interesting and different working with Plantific, and I guess that's what I want to sort of bring to the table today about how we've worked together.
Great, thanks, Ellie. Just checking in, can you see my slides? Is there any way to get some feedback? I guess yes. Okay.
No.
Nope. No slides. Okay, let's try sharing that again.
Yeah, we can't see the slides at this moment, Cem.
Okay. Yeah, if you give me 1 second. I was sharing before. Were you able to see it before?
Yeah, it was up before. Yeah.
It was up before?
Yeah,
okay.
we could see it before, Jim. I don't know what's happened this time. Is it a presentation you're trying to present?
Yeah. Is it coming up now?
That's
yes.
It. That's it. Well done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Cem Savas. As Dave introduced, I'm the CEO and co-founder at Plantific. For those who haven't heard about Plantific yet, we are a property technology company based out of in London. Our overall vision ultimately is to build, cutting-edge technology in the sector to help transform, people's homes and sort of review operational flows and build stronger communities. And we can talk a little bit more about that as we go. We are a fairly young business. Been in the sector for the last 2.5 years and started around 6 years ago. And we now manage over 200,000 properties through the platform and have sort of 13,000 contractors using us on a day-to-day basis. We've got around 120 people headquartered in the UK, but we also have a German business and a large team in Turkey. So what we want to discuss today and what we want to cover is ultimately how does technology sort of help housing leadership? How does it come together to sort of address what technology can do to improve processes? How can this help to improve tenant experiences? How does it help housing officers, the landlords, and especially integrate with the supply chain, which I think for a long time has been quite a big of a problem because the connection between the value chain wasn't there. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how data, technology, and process evolution are playing a big role, and how we've been working with Notting Hill Genesis, but also with other clients. The three buckets that we have for today are basically, what are we doing to address the issue today? So what are the biggest challenges that Ellie and team are facing operationally around the backlog and COVID, and what they had to do to overcome them? The second big bucket is adapting. What do operational teams need to do to what we call weathering the storm, and sort of coming out of this and creating strong tenant experiences and learning from the changes that are required and that we all had to go through. And then the last bucket is advancing. And advancing for us means, how can you take advantage of basically new technologies, new operational models, new supply chain models to develop stronger execution models, reducing risk, increasing service delivery, getting more access to data, and we'll sort of get insights from Ellie around what Notting Hill Genesis has been doing on that front. So very much looking forward to discuss these topics with you, and please feel free to raise any questions you might have. So if you go into addressing the key WIP challenges, Ellie, what I wanted to sort of ask you is, before sort of you guys knew what is happening and the first few days in sort of COVID situation, can you describe a little bit what was happening and what you guys had to do to address some of the challenges? And the big four topics have been around sort of getting access to people's homes. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty around who can access which homes at what time. Any hidden repairs that might be piling up, capacity constraints, and flexibility around supply chain. And you also have a DLO. And so, what have you guys addressed at the early days of COVID, and what did that mean to your WIP?
Yeah, so as we went into lockdown, and I think as sort of plans emerged for the first few days, obviously we were sort of in crisis mode, putting together, turning around quite a large operation actually over about a week. So previously residents could go onto a self-serve system and book a repair. We've got 3 different repair routes. One is a tier 1 principal contractor. The other is a DLO who currently work through the Plentific platform, and the other is Plentific directly, so the market based. So we needed to think quite quickly about what repairs we could provide, and given the fact that we would be putting our contractors at some risk if they were going into people's homes. So we moved quite quickly to an emergency only repairs process, which basically meant pretty much if you've got a flood or a gas leak, then we would still come in safely to deliver a repair, but everything else we were still logging the repair. So the Plentific platform and our software gave us the ability to still log the repair, but we weren't fixing it at that point in time. So this basically gave us good visibility of any backlog that was building up, and which we know would be a challenge, because once you get into that situation with a backlog, it's quite difficult to get back out as the taps turn back on. So we worked quite closely with Plentific to make sure that we were tracking that backlog and had sight of those hidden repairs. As we've transitioned through lockdown and things have eased up, we're now able to start to deliver more repairs. And to tackle the backlog, so we were able to prioritize some of those jobs, so we could go in with maybe the most important ones first. I mean, I think the key thing really was around we sort of did it in an evolutionary way, rather than just making any big decisions that on this date we're going to do X, Y, and Z, to allow us to be flexible and adapt our model. And Plentific's agile approach really helped us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys were quite advanced in how you use data and processes to understand, how to manage the workflow, right? So we've seen many other landlords just basically turn off what the customer service was doing. They basically told tenants, sorry, we're not doing any non-emergency works, and they didn't really have much visibility, or don't have much visibility on what's happening with those works. Through your WorkWise program and self-serve program using technology, I think you're very quickly able to adapt to things opening up, things closing down, which I think helped you guys a lot. And from our experience, we actually haven't seen any backlog piling up with Notting Hill Genesis through our platform. That I think shows the strength of being empowered by the data usage and looking at process digitalization. Were there any issues around getting access to people's homes, and have you seen trends around people being more hesitant around letting people in, and especially around gas or compliance topics during this period?
Yeah, we've definitely seen some hesitancy with our residents. We're still seeing that, particularly people that are shielding. We're working quite closely with our housing teams to try to gain access to those properties where we do need to do compliance checks. But we were able to provide information through the Plentific platform to the marketplace, so that they could go in with the correct PPE, following the correct procedures, and that was done quite quickly. I think one of the real strengths of the Plentific model through this crisis that's come to the fore is the fact that furlough hasn't been an issue. So, for example, and I'm not saying that it has been with our other contractors, but where our other routes like our DLO and our tier one contractor have potentially furloughed a lot of staff or got rid of a lot of agency staff, which was fine when we were in the emergency process. But when it comes to scaling back up, bringing those resources back in, clearly adds a little bit of delay into that. Whereas with Plentific, because of the fact that people can kind of just come onto the platform and do work, it's kept that supply element of the supply chain open, which has been really useful to us.
Okay. Besides the web, what other operational challenges did you guys face during up to now, basically, and like working from home and empowering people to use Zoom, and do you think that some of these elements will stay, or are you thinking about coming back in the normal way again?
Yeah, I mean, kindly, Jem, you described us as quite ahead in terms of our data. I mean, I think like other landlords, we have issues with data and multiple systems. There's plenty to go at in terms of kind of improving the way that we work. We were fortunate that we were all working from laptops anyway, and we'd moved to a more office-based agile approach, so moving around within the office environment just before lockdown, which meant that we were quite quickly able to move to a working from home arrangement. I don't think that we'll ever go back to large-scale office work, but that doesn't mean that we won't use our offices to do some work. So things like collaboration is really difficult, actually, especially creative tasks are quite difficult to do via Zoom, but there have been some real benefits as well. So we've been able to develop a contactless void system. Our surveyors have been able to work with residents to take photos and videos during this period, and our contractors have made much more use of video when they've been out on site. So really it's opened the door to quite a lot of new innovation, but I think a blend is the right way. So some working from home, some working within a space where you need to work together, and predominantly, which is where we should be, which is out in the community and working within people's homes.
Okay. If we go to the next topic, which is probably even more exciting, is what have you guys learned? What tactics to adapt to new behaviors? Right, you started talking about some of the voids is now done fully digitally and hands off. What are you doing on the tenants? So the experience side, tenant communication side. What sort of new things are you guys thinking about?
Yeah, so although we're a large landlord, we have quite a unique operating model. So our housing officers have quite relatively small patches of around 100 to 200 properties per housing officer, which means that they have a close relationship with their tenants. Certainly through this period, that's been come into its own, and we've been able to quite quickly understand where our tenants are, who are shielding, who might need extra support, and I can see that kind of continuing. One of the things we are making good use of as well is web chat. So at the moment, residents have the ability to serve themselves on our platform, and it is truly a self-service platform around repairs and rents. Or they can go via their housing officer. We've seen the self-serve element has really come into its own at this period in time, where perhaps people don't want to speak face to face with a housing officer. So I think there's more to do on that. And I think if you think about things like digital GP services and the way that you can actually have a medical appointment now via video, there's a lot of scope for future work around liaising with residents in that area.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the benefits of a crisis like this, it pushes technology forward, and digitalization, as you mentioned, in health has moved quite quickly, and obviously in sort of video calls, but also getting people to use more digital tools. And a couple of years ago, omni-channel was a fancy word, and people could never really make the online journeys work because it was much, I guess, easier for people to just pick up their phone. And I think this time is putting a lot of great momentum into, sort of digitalizing people's processes. So I think it's a good time for that. In terms of your supply chain, your contractor guidelines, have you had to make a huge amount of changes now? Or are you thinking about sort of adapting to different models? I mean, obviously you're working with us, with tier ones and DLOs, but are you seeing any sort of changes in market dynamics around contractors?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've seen, I mean, a lot of contractors have scaled back, and only in the news this week, I saw that Travis Perkins, who are one of our main part suppliers, are closing some stores. So clearly people are thinking about rationalizing their footprint and moving to a more agile, just-in-time approach. I think where there is quite a lot of scope for improvement technology wise in our sector is around compliance and visibility around compliance. So we've got the Hackett review, which is some legislation around fire safety and understanding our buildings much better, what they're made out of, the components, having visibility of every fire risk assessment that's gone through. There's certainly lots of potential there for technology. It feels like the only way really for a large organisation like ours, with the number of buildings that we've got, to keep visibility and to understand what sits within our buildings. So I think that the way we're working at the moment has highlighted the need actually to accelerate to that quite quickly.
I think the biggest change we see with you and with other clients is around operational visibility, right? And you mentioned the data side of things, and just getting access to KPIs across the portfolio at a click of a button seems to be quite a big challenge for many. What do you think you guys are sort of, if at all, any changes you're seeing before COVID and with sort of things more going digital, teams working more remote? Are you working on sort of getting the operational side more digitalized, getting them more visible so you can make quicker decisions going forward?
Yeah, we absolutely need to move to database decision making. I get really frustrated that if I want to see some data, there's some things I can get quite quickly, but if it's anything that's kind of bespoke, and it's probably not that difficult, that it should be on hand, it takes somebody a good day, sometimes a week, to pull that information together, to verify it, to make sure that it's correct in order to make a decision, and that adds delay in to anything that we're doing. So there's so much that we can do around data and in particular, I think a really untapped area is predictive analytics. So understanding in advance where we need to invest our money in the best way to improve our assets, where we might want to be more joined up in terms of some of the things we do around responsive repairs and planned investment, to make sure that we're really maximising our resources for the benefit of our residents. We were looking at that sort of, this has been an issue in the sector for a long time around data, and I think the technology's moved on quite a bit now, so there are things that we can access to enable us to improve in that area. But I mean, COVID has sort of thrown up problems, but actually identified areas of opportunity as well. I think if we can be a bit leaner, then perhaps we can invest more money in the data side.
And do you think that sort of senior management has seen issues arise through this, having to work from home and not being able to, be in the office so much, that they sort of pressure to react quicker to these things? Like, I mean, as you say, the data problem has probably been around for a long time, right? So do you think this time people are going to react a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think what this crisis is has surfaced is like it's more important now than ever that we do have good data. So when you're in an office environment, you can pick up a lot of information because you can walk to somebody's desk and have that conversation, or you're working sort of more as a unit, I guess. And obviously, I don't know, for those of you that don't know, we merged 2 years before COVID as well, so we just come out of our full integration process, which was a 2-year process to kind of get to one process. And the next iteration of that is to kind of take the data to the next level. And if we are going to work in a more agile and different way, so perhaps more in the community, more at home and less in offices, then we definitely need to have visibility of some of those performance data, and the way where we're spending our money, etc.
Yeah, I completely agree, and sort of touches on the next point I want to briefly discuss is around remote working. I mean, we've all been doing it now for a while. What do you think is the future model as we come out of this? And are you guys thinking about a second phase that might happen? Are you more comfortable now that there seems to be slowly some medicine coming out that helps? Like, how do you think, as an organization, with being pushed into remote working now and slowly coming out, and I guess, does everyone wants to come back, and what do you do if people don't, right? So I mean, we also face the same questions as a small company or as a tech company.
Yeah, so we have got an office open at the moment in London, which is our head office, which we're basically saying, if you can work from home, do work from home. But some people have gone in either because it's difficult for them to work at home, or like for well-being reasons, like they live on their own and they just want to have some interaction with other people. But it's fair to say that is quite limited numbers. I mean, I think the future work, for me, work is what you do, not where you go. And for some people, particularly in assets, clearly work is where you go because you need to go to places to fix a building. But I think for where we've got things like finance or some of our more central services, there isn't really a need for people to sit together in an office. So I think it depends on it depends on the nature of the business, actually. Things like a customer service center, for example, can easily be dispersed, and has been, and as people have been working from home in the same way, like when you ring a holiday rep, you ring up and generally they're working from their own home. So there's definitely sort of opportunities there. I don't think we'll look the same way.
Okay. If we go into the third part of our discussion, which we call advancing, so a bit more longer term, like what are the strategies that you guys are working on that will change your business over the next 2, 3, 4 years? And we talked a little bit about the flexible agile workforce to adapt to it. What do you do to reduce operational risks going forward? I mean, there are obviously a number of risks that housing providers or landlords face. Looking at your new sales, sort of probably being under pressure, probably leaseholder business probably under pressure with lots of void works, and I'm just guessing. I don't know the numbers, but I could see some pressure points there. I guess it's good to be a social housing provider because income probably keeps coming, right? And voids is not as high on the social housing side. But how do you think about reducing your operational risk going forward, having seen what the impact could be in these kind of circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, in order to continue to develop and grow, and to develop and grow further social housing, we do need to build. We do need to build properties to sell them to make money to fund our social housing arm. That's traditionally what we've done in terms of kind of an income stream, because we don't get direct grant in the same way that we did from government. So we have this cross subsidy model. With the slowdown, particularly in London, with the sales market, and obviously now the impact of COVID on the economy, that does have an impact on us as an organisation, and we do need to think differently about our income streams going forwards. We do need to think quite carefully about efficiency, about reducing operating costs, potentially reducing office footprints. The other thing is around the way that people want to, really big picture, the way that people might want to live in the future. So is a traditional care setting is still going to be seen as a good thing beyond COVID? We know that infection rates were high in care home settings, that carers are our lowest paid workers and really undervalued in society. It's propping up a failing health system essentially. And the other thing is around, will people still want to live in a city in the way that they did? Will shared homes still be a way that people want to cohabit? Will we need to think about developing homes with more workspace where people are working more from home, which have sort of an office space built onto them? So those are some of the bigger picture things that we're thinking about in terms of an organisation going forwards. The other thing is as well, I suppose, which is a benefit, is the ability to tap into. So we talk about skill shortages, but if we're not saying that people that work for us need to live in London and work in London, we could open up. We're opening up the UK, and longer term, who knows, globally, the ability to tap into other skills if we're using this way of working. So I think that presents an opportunity, particularly around things like digital. At the moment, I've got a team working in an offshore team working in India on some coding. And that's much easier through this environment. You can have conversations, and I think there's a future to do that.
I mean, you mentioned sort of understanding the bigger picture and how people are changing how they live, and to some extent your portfolio is impacted by that, to some extent probably less so. But how does a housing association or social housing association think about the future, think about innovation, think about how you can go with the times of how people want to live, being short term, being more flexible, co-sharing spaces? Do you guys have a strategy of how to approach these topics, or is it more random that these topics come up and then you look at them?
No, so we're developing our new corporate strategy at the moment. So we had a kind of merger strategy that was 2 years, and we're now in the process of developing a new corporate strategy. We had progressed it quite far, and then COVID hit, and I think it's the right thing to do, to go back and look at it, because we may not see the radical changes that we were anticipating a couple of months ago, but certainly the world will be a different place. So yeah, we're putting together that 5-year strategy at the moment, and all of the things I've said really around the types. What does a housing association do? Housing associations are very different across the UK. There are lots of similarities. We all provide homes, and we all provide social homes. But actually, some are more predominantly focused on care, some are more rural, some have more high-rise buildings, which brings with it different problems. So I think sort of focusing on what type of housing association we want to be, and certainly part of that will be a digital, digitally based technology based housing association, because that is the direction in which other sectors are going. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think our residents want that, as long as we still provide a good service.
Yeah, I mean, those are the the 2 points still that I want to cover, is around owning the process and service development. And maybe we can spend a bit more time on this, because you guys have, started way earlier than COVID with, sort of making changes to your to how you're thinking about service development, and how you're sort of taking back processes in-house and owning them. I mean, I remember when we first started, there was quite a lot outsourced to third parties, and, call centers, and, tenants had to go maybe through a third supplier instead of talking to you guys directly in some areas, for example. Can you describe a little bit your future vision of what a good service looks like, and how Notting Hill Genesis thinks about owning the process? When I look at the tenant engagement side all the way to the supply chain and everyone sitting in between, what is the future vision you think that you are striving towards to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we need to simplify is the supply chain and that end-to-end process, and ownership of that process. So where we see our biggest dissatisfaction in from our residents is generally where something's fallen between the gaps within that process. So I think big picture, and understanding what that supply chain looks like, and understanding every single element of that, and how we can make that leaner, more efficient, and how we can own that is the way forward.
Okay. What do you think the WorkWise program has done to your organization from owning the process point of view? Has it changed the internal way of working at all? Or?
Yeah, so WorkWise is interesting. For those of you that don't know, WorkWise is our internal cloud-based solution, where residents can book services directly with us. The resident and our staff see the same picture. So and it links to Plentific. What WorkWise has done has reduced costs significantly, so we can make sure that our housing officers can focus on the more specialist tasks. So we are automating a lot of our transactions. The more of those sort of transactions that can be done quite easily by our digital WorkWise platform, the better. Because that means we can free up our staff to to provide a more specialist service, but B, have a more meaningful job. Nobody really wants to come in, I doubt, and sit there and do like highly level transaction, filling out 10 forms and all of that sort of stuff, if it can be done quite easily. We've got a number of questions, Gemma. I don't know whether we should.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there, Ellie and Jem, if you don't mind, because I think we started a few minutes late, but I don't want to run too much into the other sessions.
Sure, absolutely.
Am I okay to do that? Yeah, I don't. If you've got any groundbreaking points to make, then please make them during the questions. But Ellie, you're right. There's there, and
should we just go through them? How long do we have till 2:45?
Well, we've got a few more minutes, and we've got about 10 minutes. Okay. I think we can spin on. The first question I'll ask is, does the Plentific model work just as well with smaller landlords? Scalability to smaller asset numbers, perhaps, because we've heard lots about, and we know about Notting Hill Genesis site, the size, and you can see the realities of what and the stuff that's happened with Ellie. Could you just maybe comment on that, Jem?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what the platform does is streamline workflows, right, from tenant all the way to supply chain. And there's no difference between a small or a large landlord, because a responsive repair is a responsive repair, a void is a void, and a compliance product is a compliance product. But what's, with Notting Hill, the challenge is they have basically the entire portfolio. So the platform has to work for all of those. Right. But we have smaller clients. We have clients that have, 2,000 or 3,000 properties. We have clients that have 95,000 properties, and Notting Hill is a very large client, of course. And so we work with smaller associations as well.
Okay.
But also, Jem, and like anybody can put a repair on, right? So an individual
Yep.
can as well. So it can really go right down to the lowest level to a landlord with 10 properties
Yep.
potentially.
Well, I think
Yep.
that's a very good point. So you can have the flexibility, Ellie, can't you? It's not just like you have to have departments doing this.
Yeah.
Smaller landlords I know very well have to multitask in some instances. So, so that's thanks for that. The next one I love. It's a great question. Could Plantific become an Uber without the social problems? Of course, connect the marketplace straight to tenants, perhaps with technology like XM we've seen and IoT type tech. Is that something that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, there was an article in Insider Housing, I think, last year about us being the Uber of the sector.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't quite like it because we are not providing a service like Uber that just connects any driver to any property. Like
Right.
we have very selected contractors that are very well connected to our landlords, and we do lots of work with them. We know each other, we train them, we grow them, and so yes, in terms of using the simplicity of booking a repair and knowing where a transaction is, and things like quote variation, hugely difficult if you're not using digital tools because it's very manual, right? Who accepts what quote and when should it get done? And you don't just want your contractor to send you a bill at the end of the job if you haven't seen what they've done. So all these things are completely streamlined now, and from that point, yeah, happy to be compared to Uber, but we don't just send random contractors to random sort of properties.
Yeah.
Good.
I think it's the simplicity aspect of Uber that's to me. Actually, I'm going to use another word here. If you agree with this one, Jim, it's a word I like. It's disruptor. I think Plantific could be seen as, whether you like it or not, a disruptor, because you're doing, as mentioned earlier, doing things a bit differently. And I like that. It's what drives me. So Uber were the first to do that model. There's others copying them now. But I think by doing that, the disruptive industry, the disruptive technology had the impact rather than the business model. So yeah, it's an interesting analogy and an interesting word. I do remember seeing that article. Does the Plantific model work just as well with smaller landlords? Well, that's the one I asked earlier. I'm asking the same questions. How quickly can a marketplace be set up for, say, an HA with 3,000 properties?
I mean, from experience, it's never us that's slow. It's typically our clients who are slow. So we can set it up as quickly as our clients can work with us. To give you our fastest, and sorry, Ellie, this was not Notting Hill Genesis, but it was actually Peabody, another big client.
Yeah, we know Peabody.
Yeah, they set up in 8 days.
Okay.
So from saying we're interested in launching a pilot to going live, going through executive board, signing all contracts, IT, GDPR, all this stuff, we've done in 8 days to go live. And then there were hundreds of jobs a day coming through. So it can be as quick as that. But, oftentimes we find that the social housing partners are slower to find the data, to give us the right connection, get the sign-offs and so on. In regions where we're not present yet, so new regions, we typically say 6 weeks for a new marketplace. So we would have to build a new contractor base. In places like Greater London, Southeast, where we're very strong, we could go online immediately. And what clients often do is they use us as a backup to their tier one relationship that's under contract, or as a backup to the DLO if they struggle sometimes. So we can go live pretty quickly across all service requirements.
Okay, thank you. This one's for Ellie, and it's from me. Can Notting Hill Genesis see analytics on such things as trends on no access visits and so on? So can you drill
within Plantific or like generally?
Generally, but where does that data come from?
We can see trends on no access, but it comes back to my point earlier that I can see anything I want to, but it's just the speed in which I can see it. So we as a housing association, we collect lots of data, and with WorkWise actually, it all goes through online through the system. So if there's no access, we know straight away and we can pull that off. But most things we can see. It just depends on the time. WorkWise allows us to do that quite quickly, actually.
That's probably why I asked my next question. They weren't directly linked, but they are in a way. Is data the number one obstacle then? Or is it?
I think visibility of data, is the number one obstacle. And having data in one place that you can make sense of. I think every housing association would say the same.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly see that. How does the system work with, how does the Plantific system work with the housing system? So whether it's your housing management system, everyone uses the word, or pretty much everyone uses the word integrated. How does it work with your CRM, for example, Ellie? You know, does it stand on its own as a system, or what's the level of integration amongst the different systems you may
I mean,
have?
Jem might actually be better placed
Yeah,
to answer this, if I'm honest.
Yeah, sure. Happy to take this one. So we are fully integrated into Workwise. So any tenant inquiry that comes through is routed through the Workwise platform to come to the right supply chain model. So it could be routed to the DLO, it could be routed to the marketplace, and there's no manual touch point on that. And then what we have is what we call APIs and webhooks, and that sort of can feed back information to Notting Hill's Northgate system or Microsoft Dynamics, so the layers, and it can even push data back to tenants. And so if you want to send any updates, where the contractor is and when they're coming and scheduling times and so on, it can all be pushed back.
That's what I was kind of getting at when I jumped into that question, and I thought the CRM part was mostly talking about the communication to the tenant. What can they see?
Yeah, I mean, just another word on CRM. The challenge is that the existing old school players have not really been opening up through API, so it's a bit more difficult. And also, most housing associations have a slightly different version of what they've built, so it's not as plug and play. But we have lots of experience integrating fully, so there's no manual requirements. So I mean, our system deals with the whole vetting process, procurement process, with quoting, invoicing, payment. So we go much further than just a workflow, but we also deal with purchase orders and those kind of things.
Yeah. The next question that's been voted up, it says, it looks like a good shake-up of traditional repairs delivery. What's next to disrupt? I suppose that's
I mean, I think there's so much to go at, and particularly around the asset. I think there's masses to do on fire safety and compliance, which I've already alluded to. But the other area which is ripe for disruption is our development process. So from where we go to search for land, right through planning, right through to when the building is built, there's certainly room there. And the other area is probably the concept of smart buildings and the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is something that inherently is obvious that it will provide huge benefits. The struggle is cost, understanding what to do. On when you've got 64,000 properties, is a harder decision actually, the IoT, than it is when you've maybe got 100. So but there's got to be some potential there.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, there's some areas in Glasgow that have done some real tower block implementations of Internet of Things, with sensors and so on. So
digital twins. There's so much to go out with the asset.
There is.
Definitely.
I mean, it's coming our way. It's just a matter of when. So this next question is, how have your contractors managed? I assume this. How have they managed COVID and their ability to deliver, and how is the communication between customer and landlord managed for this?
Yeah, I think we've been really fortunate. Our contractors, we've got good relationships with our contractors, and that's really come to the fore during this period. So we've had regular communication, like daily communication with our contractors at the very beginning. They've adapted quite quickly. They've worked with us to produce, there's a brilliant video on our website, actually, if you've got time and you've got the inclination to have a look, which weights our contractor created with us, and which we shared with residents about how they're going to access the property. Plantific have been brilliant from the very outset. I think everybody's worked together to get through this period and to turn things around quickly. So
good. Time's up really, but I'm gonna I'm gonna push it a little bit if you don't mind. Ian Spence again's asked some questions. Do you have can we make this one sharp? Do you have a business continuity plan for failure of Workwise? Oof, failure of Plantific, or failure of the link between them? Is going to paper viable? Would you respond to emergency calls only? That's a hell of a question.
Yeah, we have a business continuity plan. If we have had to switch off Workwise before. Luckily for us, having housing officers with really small patches, we've got the ability to communicate with residents quite quickly.
Yeah.
And we could easily just go back to a traditional repair service. It might take us a day or two to turn it around, but yeah, there's nothing of concern there really.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a bit of a nightmare. I'm not going to underplay it, but we can do it.
It's not something we're wishing upon you, but I suppose it's a question. What are your service levels? I suppose that's set to you, Jim.
Depends what you mean. I mean, being a data-driven tech company, there's a lot of KPIs and service levels we check. But I mean, if you talk about uptime, it's whatever 99.9998%. If you talk about how fast we get works done, we have 100% conversion rate on all works, and we do thousands every day. We have a limited a minimum number of quotes we generate for clients, and that's sort of at three quotes per job level. So there's lots of KPIs we track and share and adhere to. So it's a bit of a difficult question.
I'll just quickly add. So our emergency repairs are 4 hours, and we get our other repairs done within 28 days. Plantific, absolutely, like our quickest turnaround in terms of getting jobs done because of the way that it's set up. So
yeah, good, excellent. Well, thank you both. We ran over, but we started late, so I forgive that. We're back again soon with Aidan Dunphy and the chat then. So please join us. Please network. Enjoy your coffee. Thanks, Ellie. I know your time's busy, Jim. Same with you. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ellie. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.